At our lavish wedding reception, right after our first dance, my new husband eagerly grabbed the microphone and announced to the entire room that he was legally transferring all of his premarital assets directly to his mother. Moreover, he proudly declared that from now on he would be transferring $6,000 to her every single month as a living allowance. The entire banquet hall was visibly moved to tears. Hundreds of guests praised him aloud, calling him a respectful, devoted, and fiercely loving son. I didn't cry. I merely chuckled, calmly took the microphone from his hand, and said exactly one sentence. The room virtually exploded into chaos, and then completely froze in absolute shock. Good day, dear listeners. It's Diana again. I'm so glad you're here with me. Please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and like this video, and also let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. That way, I can see exactly how far my stories have traveled. The final chord of the traditional wedding march had barely faded into the high ceilings of the ballroom. The MC, a cheerful man in a tailored tuxedo, was just about to hand the microphone over to me and David to give our standard, rehearsed welcome speech. But David suddenly stepped forward, aggressively beating him to it. Before we begin the reception, I have an incredibly important announcement to make. David's voice echoed loudly through the massive speakers across the ballroom. The happy chatter of 300 dressed-up guests gradually died down. I stood next to him in my pristine, custom-fitted white wedding dress, my heavy bouquet tightly gripped in my hand, maintaining the requisite, glowing bridal smile. But deep down in the pit of my stomach, a vague, cold unease began to take root. We hadn't discussed any special announcements. Today was supposed to be the most important, predictable day of my life. David turned to me with a tender, performative look. But in the exact next second, he dramatically shifted his gaze to his mother, who was seated directly at the head table. I will never, ever forget the woman who, denying herself everything, raised me single-handedly and put me through college. David projected into the microphone, his voice thick with rehearsed emotion. It is exclusively because of her endless sacrifices that I am the successful man I am today. His mother, my now mother-in-law, Nancy Sterling, immediately dabbed the corners of her eyes with a lace tissue, projecting the ultimate, flawless picture of a deeply moved, humble parent. David took a deep, dramatic breath, and his voice rose sharply for the entire hall to hear. I officially announce today, in front of all our family and friends, that all of my premarital assets, including my 2 luxury condos, my entire stock portfolio, and my personal savings accounts, are being transferred entirely as a permanent legal gift to my mother. At first, a dead, stunned silence hung over the banquet hall, but it was quickly followed by a sudden, massive eruption of thunderous applause. Several of David's older relatives even stood up from their seats, clapping and shouting, "Good job, Dave! That's a real son. What a rarity. You hardly ever see young men who care for their mothers like that anymore." The smile on my face completely froze. A loud, ringing emptiness formed in my head. Transfer all premarital assets to his mother? David seemed incredibly pleased, practically glowing with the crowd's adoring reaction. He raised a hand magnanimously, calling for quiet, and continued his speech. "And that's not all," he announced proudly. "Starting next month, I will consistently transfer $6,000 of my salary directly to my mom for her living expenses, to at least somehow thank her for everything she has done for me." The crowd erupted into fierce whispers. "Wow, $6,000 a month. Dave makes about $15,000 a month, doesn't he? Now that is true filial duty. But wait, what are they going to live on themselves?" Amidst the chaotic whispers of the guests, my mother-in-law, or rather, David's mother, was now openly, theatrically sobbing. Leaning heavily on her relatives for support, she stood up and reached her trembling arms out to her son. David walked over and hugged her tightly. Under the bright spotlight, mother and son were playing out a grand, touching soap opera drama for 300 witnesses. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold my bouquet. I felt like an absolute stranger at my own celebration. I wasn't a bride. I was just an unscripted prop on a stage. I was a laughingstock. Katie, sweetheart, you support my decision, right? David had finally remembered I was standing there. He turned around, walked back onto the stage, and confidently held out the microphone to me. His eyes radiated complete, arrogant certainty. You always said that what you loved most about me is my deep sense of responsibility and how fiercely I care for my family, he prompted smoothly. The eyes of the entire room violently converged on me. I saw my parents sitting at their VIP table, their faces completely pale with shock. My best friend, Anna, was covering her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with horror. David's relatives looked up at me with an entitled, challenging expression that clearly said, "Let's see how reasonable you are. Support him. Support the fact that you have zero respect for me, your wife. Support the fact that you are completely destroying our future financial foundation. Support the fact that you will be giving nearly half your paycheck to your mother, while we have to somehow pay a mortgage, buy groceries, and eventually raise children on scraps." I slowly reached out and took the microphone. My knuckles were white from the immense tension. David looked at me confidently, waiting for his applause. His mother had also magically stopped crying, wiping her eyes and waiting for me to publicly agree, to help them cement the legendary status of the great, devoted son of the Sterling family. I smiled. It wasn't a fake smile of joy or a nervous smile of compliance. It was a genuine, terrifying smile born from the realization of the absolute, spectacular absurdity of the situation. I raised the microphone to my lips. The spotlight hit my white dress. It became so incredibly quiet in the hall that you could actually hear the low hum of the industrial air conditioning. Since that's how it is, my voice rang out, perfectly calm and crystal clear. Then I also have an announcement to make. I turned my body to face David directly. I looked at the fleeting flash of confusion entering his eyes, and I enunciated every single word, so it echoed off the back walls. The wedding is canceled. We're done. A dead, breathless silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds, and then the hall exploded. What? They're breaking up? She's canceling the wedding right at the reception. The guests' frantic whispers instantly escalated into a loud, chaotic roar. My mom and dad jumped up from their seats. Their initial shock had turned into deep, terrifying concern. My dad even took a protective step toward the stage, but my mom held his arm back. They knew me. They knew I couldn't back down now. The smug, arrogant smile on David's face vanished instantly, giving way to incredulous, panicked anger. "Catherine, have you lost your mind?" he hissed off microphone. "Today is our wedding." "It was our wedding," I corrected him. I kept the microphone raised, so my voice carried to every corner of the room. "Since you've clearly chosen your mother as your primary life partner, I have absolutely no intention of being the third wheel in this sick marriage." "What kind of ungrateful nonsense are you spouting?" David's mother, Nancy, had already completely dropped her mask of the tearful, touched mother. She marched toward the stage furiously, her face red with rage. "Dave loves his mother. What's wrong with that? Isn't that a virtue? How can you, as a woman, be so shameless and greedy?" I switched the microphone to my other hand and looked her dead in the eye from the stage. "Respecting your parents is a virtue, Nancy. But blind, financially suicidal obedience is sheer stupidity," I said coldly. "Your son is 30 years old, not 3. He is giving you all his premarital assets and another $6,000 every single month. And what exactly is our new family supposed to do? Who will pay our $7,000 mortgage? Who will pay the daily expenses when kids come along? What money will we use to buy them diapers and formula? You little gold digger." Nancy shrieked, turning pale with blistering rage. "Are you trying to settle financial scores with me right now?" I'm simply stating the mathematical facts, I replied, turning my gaze back to David. His face had turned to absolute stone. Did you consult me before making this massive financial decision, David? Did you ask for my opinion? Or do you genuinely think that just because we're getting married, I have to unconditionally accept whatever insane terms you set, including being an unpaid extra in your theatrical play about being the perfect son? David opened his mouth, but he couldn't find the words. Obviously, in his arrogant little mind, he hadn't expected me to actually stand up for myself and cause a scene in front of 300 people. Katie, stop this hysteria! He finally found his voice, his tone softening in a desperate attempt to salvage his public image. We can discuss the exact numbers at home. Today is our wedding. So many guests are watching us. Oh, now you remember what shame and reputation mean. I scoffed, my tone ice cold. When you publicly announced you were handing over all your property to Mommy to get a round of applause, you didn't think about my public humiliation. You didn't think about our future life. David, I get it now. You don't need a wife. You need a supporting actress for your drama about great filial love. Catherine Evans, he growled under his breath, stepping toward me. But the room was already descending into total chaos. The Sterling relatives were jumping up from their tables, pointing fingers and accusing me of having absolutely no class. To pull a stunt like this at a wedding, to embarrass both families. Is it Dave's fault he loves his mom? If you won't marry a great guy like that, who will you ever marry? But my relatives and friends didn't hold back either. They began shouting right back. Loving your mom is normal, but know your financial limits. He hasn't even signed the marriage license yet, and he's already transferred everything to her and is giving away a fortune every month. How is Katie supposed to live with him? He's a massive mama's boy. The MC stood helplessly to the side of the stage, trying several times to intervene and smooth things over, but no one paid him any attention. Suddenly, my best friend Anna ran up onto the stage. She stood fiercely next to me, grabbed the second microphone from the DJ stand, and declared loudly, "Katie is absolutely right. Marriage is a financial and emotional partnership between two people. Dave, did you even think about her feelings? The down payment for your shared luxury condo, the one you bought as your family nest. Katie's family paid for exactly half of it, and now you're publicly saying you're giving all your property to your mother. That means the $90,000 Katie's parents gave you went straight into your mom's pocket." Those specific words acted like a financial bombshell in the room. What? The bride's family paid half the down payment. So half the condo belongs to the Evans family. How could he legally transfer it all to his mother? Okay, that's crossing a massive line. That's theft. David's face turned a violent shade of crimson. He hadn't expected Anna to bring up the hard financial receipts in front of everyone. The luxury condo we had planned to make our permanent home cost $900,000. The down payment was $180,000, of which my parents had generously contributed exactly $90,000 from their retirement savings. We had agreed that both our names would be legally placed on the deed immediately after the wedding. I would have paid that money back to them, David started to stammer, sweating profusely under the stage lights. When would you pay it back? And how would you pay it back? I pressed, stepping closer to him, the microphone catching every word. You're going to give your mom $6,000 a month. Out of what's left, you have to pay a $7,000 mortgage, taxes, and buy groceries. Where exactly are you going to get the extra cash to pay my parents back their $90,000? Are you going to pay my father with your Son of the Year certificate? Laughter actually broke out in the room from my side of the aisle, quickly drowned out by the angry, defensive shouts of the groom's humiliated relatives. Enough! Nancy suddenly shrieked, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at me from the floor. I always knew you were a piece of work. You haven't even entered the family yet, and you're already trying to divide our assets. My son is wonderful. You are lucky to even be marrying him, and you humiliated him at his own wedding. If that's how it is, then there will be no wedding." "That is exactly what I want," I replied calmly. I turned to the terrified MC. "Sir, please announce that the wedding ceremony is officially cancelled. However, the banquet food has already been paid for, so it continues. Consider it a massive dinner party I'm hosting. All cash gifts given to the bride and groom will be returned to the guests in full before you leave." Having said that, I reached up and decisively took off my expensive lace veil in front of everyone. Then I pulled the massive diamond engagement ring off my finger. David had supposedly saved up for it for half a year, and back then I had been moved to tears by the gesture. Now, holding it, it just felt like a cheap mockery. I grabbed David's hand and pressed the heavy ring firmly into his palm. He stared at me, completely stunned, his mouth open, as if he still couldn't believe this nightmare was actually happening to him. "David, from today on, absolutely nothing ties us together," I said, clearly looking him in the eye. "I expect the $90,000 for the down payment to be returned to my family's bank account within exactly 1 week. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow morning regarding the rest." "Lawyer? What lawyer?" David finally snapped out of his shock. Pure, unadulterated panic seeped into his voice. He reached out to grab my arm. "Katie, don't do this. Please, we can talk about this normally. I can reverse my decision. I won't sign the papers." "There's no need for that," I cut him off, stepping back out of his reach. "Be happy with your mother." I turned to the crowd of 300 stunned guests and gave a deep, formal nod. "I sincerely apologize for making you witness this ugly scene. I am covering half the expenses for this banquet today. Please enjoy yourselves and eat." After those final words, I took Anna's hand, lifted the heavy silk hem of my wedding dress, and decisively walked off the stage. "Katie! Catherine, wait! Did you hear me?" David yelled frantically after me. I didn't look back. My parents immediately rushed up to me in the aisle. My mom's eyes were red with unshed tears. My dad looked at me with a complex, incredibly proud expression. "Sweetheart," Dad said gruffly, "are you absolutely sure about this?" "I am." I squeezed my parents' hands tightly. "I don't need a marriage like this." The three of us walked out of the grand banquet hall together, our heads held high under the watchful, whispering eyes of the crowd. Right at the heavy oak double doors, I paused. I turned around and threw one last glance back at David. He was standing in a tight, panicked circle of his mother and his relatives, looking desperately across the room at me. His gaze was a frantic mix of anger, confusion, and perhaps a massive drop of genuine regret. But it was far, far too late. We stepped out of the venue. The bright May sun was slightly blinding after the dim ballroom. I took a massive, shaking deep breath. The intricate beading on my wedding dress gleamed blindingly in the sunlight. "Where to now?" Anna asked, still buzzing with adrenaline. "Home first to change out of this," I said, looking down at the white silk. I paused, letting my heart rate finally slow down. And then to a lawyer. "Are you seriously going to hire a lawyer already?" Anna asked, her eyes wide. "Absolutely," I said, tugging at the ruffled layers of the dress. "It's not just about getting the down payment back, Anna. I want to make sure I sever all financial and legal ties with this man permanently and irrevocably. He wanted to play legal games with assets? Fine, we'll play." My phone started vibrating wildly in my bridal clutch. I glanced at the screen. David was calling. I declined the call, and then I powered the phone completely off. As of today, a man named David Sterling no longer existed in Catherine Evans's life. Back at my parents' suburban house, I finally changed out of the heavy, suffocating white silk and slipped into a simple t-shirt and jeans. My expensive wedding dress lay carelessly draped over the living room sofa like a giant, wilted white flower. My mom sat next to it, her eyes red and puffy. My dad was standing out on the balcony, aggressively smoking cigarette after cigarette. Mom, don't cry, I said softly, sitting next to her and wrapping my arms around her shoulders. You should be happy. I just avoided jumping into a raging fire pit. But you're 30, Katie, Mom sniffled, burying her face in a tissue. Breaking up at 30 is infinitely better than divorcing at 40 with a traumatized child in my arms, I answered calmly. Besides, we hadn't signed the marriage license at City Hall yet. Legally, I am not a divorcee. I am just a woman who walked away from a bad deal. My dad walked back into the living room, bringing the sharp smell of tobacco with him. About the down payment, Katie, are you actually going to demand it back? Of course I am, I said, my voice hardening into steel. $90,000 isn't pocket change, Dad. That is your hard-earned life savings. If I back down now, they will decide they can wipe their feet on me forever. I have to show David that his choices have a catastrophic price. Dad stayed quiet for a few seconds, staring at me, and finally nodded. All right, I support you. But getting cash back from Nancy Sterling won't be easy. We need a battle plan. I already have one. I stood up. My best friend Anna set up an emergency meeting with Michael Vance, a high-power civil attorney. I'm going to see him right now. You two are exhausted. Rest. Leave the dirty work to me. Attorney Michael Vance's office was located downtown, on the 28th floor of a sleek corporate high-rise. Seeing me walk in wearing jeans on what was supposed to be my wedding day, Mr. Vance looked mildly surprised. Catherine, wasn't today your wedding? The wedding is permanently canceled, I explained, sitting down and getting straight to the point. Mr. Vance, I need your help to recover stolen funds and legally shield myself from my ex-fiancé and his psychotic mother. After hearing the whole story, the lawyer adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses. The situation is legally crystal clear. The down payment of $90,000 is considered a conditional premarital gift in contemplation of marriage. Since the wedding was canceled due to his actions, the legal condition was not met. You have every right to demand the total return of the funds. How much can be recovered quickly? I asked. Theoretically, the entire amount, Vance paused. I recommend starting with a formal, aggressive demand letter. We will draft it and send it out today. I am going to send it via certified mail directly to his corporate workplace. To his workplace? I raised an eyebrow. Yes, Vance smiled a shark-like smile. Sending a certified legal threat to a corporate office usually applies much more effective psychological pressure. But I advise you to be careful, Catherine. Cornered people are sometimes capable of extreme things. When I finally turned my phone back on, I was immediately hit with dozens of missed calls and frantic text messages. I opened David's voicemails. His tone had rapidly devolved from furious arrogance to desperate begging. Katie, pick up. Let's talk. I acted recklessly today. I won't transfer the property to my mom. I swear, and we can discuss her allowance. Just pick up the phone. Apparently, having cooled down without an audience to applaud him, he realized the catastrophic legal and social consequences of a stunt and got terrified. I typed a single text message to him. We have absolutely nothing to talk about. Return the $90,000 down payment and the $15,000 Omega watch I bought you within 7 days, or we will see each other in civil court. All further communication goes strictly through my lawyer. I hit send and permanently blocked his number. But the very next afternoon, David showed up at my workplace. Katie, come out. We need to talk, he shouted loudly at the reception desk, drawing the shocked attention of all my colleagues. I walked out of the glass double doors and saw an exhausted, pathetic David in a wrinkled suit. He looked drastically different from the radiant, arrogant groom at the wedding. This is my workplace, David. Leave immediately, I said, my voice deadpan. Leave. You sent a lawyer's threat directly to my office. David shrieked, his eyes bloodshot. Now my entire firm knows that my ex-fiancé is suing me. Are you happy? My bosses called me onto the carpet today. They said my personal drama is damaging the company's reputation. Do you have any idea how many years I worked my ass off to get this director position? And you only have yourself to blame for that, I replied, crossing my arms. When you decided to put on a theatrical show at our wedding and give all our future financial security to your mommy, you should have foreseen the consequences. You only thought about yourself. But I admitted I was wrong. David deflated, his voice cracking into a pathetic whine. Katie, I really understand now. Let's stop fighting. I'll return the money, but don't do it so aggressively. Give me more time. You have 6 days left, I said, glancing at my watch. Katie! David suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my wrist so hard that I winced in pain. Are you really going to be this cruel? We were together for 5 years. Let go of me! I looked down at his hand, enunciating every syllable. Then I raised my voice. Security! 2 burly corporate security guards quickly approached, grabbed David by the shoulders, and forcefully dragged him away. As he was hauled toward the revolving exit doors, he screamed, Catherine Evans, you are going to regret this. I won't forgive you. I smoothed my blouse, apologized to the staring receptionists, and went back to my desk. That evening, the situation escalated from pathetic to downright hostile. I was eating a quiet dinner with my parents when our front doorbell rang violently. My dad looked through the peephole, and his face darkened into a scowl. It's David's mother. Open it, I said calmly. Whatever is going to happen, let it happen. Nancy Sterling stood on our threshold. Without her refined, expensive wedding makeup, she looked significantly older, but her gaze was as sharp and venomous as a cornered rattlesnake. Katie, we need to talk, she snapped, pushing past my father and stepping into our living room. She swept her judgmental gaze over our modest, suburban home with thinly veiled disgust. Have a seat, Nancy, I offered coldly. No need. I'll say a few words and leave. She stood with her back rigid. David grew up without a father. I raised him entirely alone. I paid for his college. Yes, he acted impulsively at the wedding, but it was out of pure love for his mother. Is loving your mother a crime? Loving your mother is not a crime. Financially crippling your future wife to perform for an audience is, I answered. What nonsense. Nancy's voice turned shrill, echoing off the walls. My son wanted to give me his property. It is his legal right. Why are you, an outsider, interfering in our family business? Now you've sent a lawyer's letter to his office. Are you trying to destroy his career? If he loses his job because he doesn't know how to handle his personal problems without dragging his corporate office into it, that has nothing to do with me. I remained completely unfazed. Nancy trembled with blistering rage. Fine, Katie. I deeply underestimated you. You want your $90,000? Fine. I'll give it to you. Consider it a cheap fee our family paid to discover your true, greedy face. With those dramatic words, she unclasped her designer handbag, pulled out a cashier's check, and threw it aggressively onto our coffee table. Take the money and never dare come near my son again, she spat. I looked down at the check on the table, and then, to her absolute horror, I started laughing. What's so funny? She demanded fiercely. I'm laughing because you still don't get it, I said, picking up the check and casually tossing it back at her feet. This isn't a charity handout. It's my family's stolen money, and I think you've gotten something mixed up, Nancy. Your son is the one stalking me, not the other way around. Let David return this money to my lawyer himself. I am not taking a dime directly from your hands. Nancy turned ghostly pale with anger. Pointing a shaking finger at me, she hissed, You'll regret this. My son is an amazing catch. Any woman would jump at the chance to marry him. But who wants a 30-year-old dumped bride? That was the final straw for my father. Get out, my dad roared, stepping forward. At 6'2", his presence was incredibly intimidating. You are not welcome in our home. Leave! I walked over and threw the front door wide open. If you don't leave right now, I am calling the police for trespassing. Nancy glared at me venomously, snatched the cashier's check off the floor, and stormed out the door, her heels clicking furiously against the concrete. I thought I had won the battle, but Nancy Sterling was far more diabolical than I realized. On the afternoon of the third day, my friend Anna called me in an absolute panic. "Katie, disaster! Dave's mom just wrote a massive, public post on Facebook. She's claiming you're a scammer extorting money from them through fraud. A ton of people have already shared it." My heart sank. I opened Facebook and my blood began to boil. Nancy, hiding behind the mask of a grief-stricken, victimized mother, had written a massive wall of text. With fake tears in her words, she openly accused me of playing with her son's feelings, chasing their wealth, throwing a vile tantrum at the wedding to steal the spotlight, and now using corrupt lawyers to extort $90,000 from their family. Attached to the post were photos of me standing at the wedding reception with the microphone in my hand, looking cold and unfeeling. There were already hundreds of comments from locals and mutual acquaintances calling me a gold digger and a heartless fraud. I wasn't scared. I was absolutely furious. I sat down at my laptop and cracked my knuckles. If they wanted to play dirty in the court of public opinion, I was going to scorch the earth. I spent 2 hours drafting the ultimate, airtight response. I laid out the real story, sequentially. I attached the bank transfer receipts, proving my parents paid for the condo down payment. I attached short video clips from the wedding, showing David's arrogant speech. I uploaded the security camera footage from my office, showing David having a violent temper tantrum. And finally, I attached a photo I had snapped of Nancy throwing the check at my parents' coffee table. At the end, I added one sentence. "I do not need your sympathy. I need justice. I reserve the right to take severe legal action against anyone spreading these coordinated lies." I hit publish. Within an hour, the share count surpassed 1,000. The tone of the internet comments shifted instantly and violently against the Sterlings. "Oh my God, so he literally tried to steal her parents' money to give to his mom? That is the ultimate king of the mama's boys right there. Good for the girl escaping, just in time." Announcing that at a wedding is straight-up emotional blackmail against the bride. Disgusting. 2 hours later, David completely broke. He transferred the $90,000 directly into my bank account. Immediately after, he posted a handwritten letter of apology on his Facebook page, begging me for forgiveness and admitting that his mother had lied. Nancy deleted her defamatory post entirely and hid her profile. As promised, I deleted my massive post, leaving only a short message. The stolen funds have been returned. The matter is legally closed, but the corporate damage was already done. The next morning, the HR director at my company, a strict woman named Olivia, called me into her office. "Catherine, the company is highly aware of the viral scandal happening online," Olivia said coldly. "Even though it is your personal business, it casts a shadow on the firm's professional reputation. Company policy dictates we must put you on a 1-week, unpaid administrative leave until the noise dies down." My stomach plummeted. I had worked here for 6 years, pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into this company, and they were throwing me under the bus to protect their PR. I stood up slowly, maintaining my absolute dignity. "I don't need a week," I said, looking Olivia dead in the eye. "I resign, effective immediately." I walked back to my desk, packed my belongings in a cardboard box, and left the building with my head held high. A company that punishes a victim for defending herself against fraud wasn't worth my loyalty anyway. But karma is an incredibly efficient worker. Just an hour later, Anna texted me a link. It was an official press release from David's corporate employer. "Due to the severe damage to our firm's reputation regarding Mr. David Sterling's public conduct, management has decided to indefinitely suspend Mr. Sterling from his directorial position." David had worked toward that director role for 8 grueling years. Because of his mother's stunt, he had lost his fiancée, his reputation, and his entire career in a single week. I thought the dust had finally settled. I thought I was free. But fate, it seems, loves a cruel, twisted joke. A month later, Anna called me with news that completely knocked the ground out from under my feet. "Katie, David is getting married next week," Anna whispered into the phone, "to a girl he's known for less than a month. Her name is Sarah Mitchell, and rumor has it she is already 3 months pregnant." I stood in my living room, gripping my phone tightly. A month ago, I was preparing to marry this man. Now he was marrying someone else who was miraculously pregnant. "And there's more," Anna continued. "I found out that Nancy secretly introduced them. She's been setting David up with Sarah since before your wedding." I felt completely apathetic. It was so incredibly absurd it was almost funny. Let him marry whoever his mommy chose for him. It wasn't my problem anymore. Until 3 days later, when a mysterious package arrived at my door. The return address was David's condo. Inside was a generic USB flash drive and a messy, handwritten note. "Katie, there are things you need to know. A week before our wedding, my mom met with Sarah. I accidentally found this hidden recording on my mom's iPad. Listen to it yourself. I'm sorry for everything. Dave." Frowning deeply, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It was a 15-minute audio file. It started with static, and then Nancy's unmistakable, shrill voice came through the speakers. "Sarah, sweetie, I'll be blunt. My Dave has completely lost his head over this Katie girl, but I can see right through her. I want you to be his wife." Then came the voice of a younger woman. "Sarah, but Mrs. Sterling, Dave loves her, and their wedding is next Saturday. I have it all planned out," the mother-in-law hissed wickedly on the tape. "Dave is going to announce right at the reception that he's transferring all his assets to me. I convinced him it's a test of her loyalty. Katie won't stand for it and will cause a huge scene. The wedding will fall apart. And then you'll take the initiative, pretend to get pregnant, and where will he go? He'll have to marry you. But what about the assets?" Sarah asked. "Oh, once you're safely married, I'll quietly transfer the properties back to you both, and I will be rid of Catherine forever." The recording cut off. I sat in front of my monitor, an ice-cold chill running violently down my spine. The entire farce at the wedding wasn't a sudden, impulsive mistake. It was a meticulously orchestrated psychological trap designed by Nancy to force me into throwing a tantrum and ruining my own wedding. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it. "Catherine," a timid, trembling voice spoke. "This is Sarah Mitchell, David's fiancée. Please, could we meet? I am so terrified." We met at a quiet corner cafe an hour later. Sarah looked about 25. She was wearing a loose maternity dress, her belly showing slightly. She looked completely exhausted and terrified. "Thank you for coming," Sarah whispered, tears immediately welling in her eyes. "You need to know the truth. My pregnancy, it's completely fake. Nancy forced me to wear a prosthetic belly." I froze. "Fake?" Sarah nodded, openly weeping now. "Nancy coached me. But Catherine, it's a nightmare. After your wedding was canceled, Dave changed completely. He drinks heavily every single day. He lost his job. And Nancy didn't just stop at the wedding assets. She forced David to legally sign over his second, fully paid-off condo to her, saying it was to protect him from scammers. He has absolutely nothing left. She controls every single penny. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, utterly bewildered. "Because I'm running away," Sarah sobbed. "If I marry into this family, my life is completely over. Nancy threatened me. She said once we're legally married, she will drug David and arrange for a real pregnancy for me. The woman is a complete psychopath. I am fleeing to Florida tonight to start over. But I had to warn you. Nancy hates you. I overheard her on the phone. She is planning to bring a mob of fake reporters to your old office building to publicly humiliate you on camera today." Sarah slid a thick envelope across the table. "This is the $25,000 Nancy paid me to go along with the scheme. I haven't touched a dime. Please take it." I pushed the envelope gently back to her. Keep it, Sarah. You need it to escape. Run and never look back. I didn't have time to process the shock. My phone rang. It was Helen, my former boss from the marketing firm. Katie, we have a massive emergency. Helen shouted over the phone. Your ex's mother just showed up outside our corporate office building with a whole mob of screaming relatives and guys holding professional cameras. She unrolled banners calling you a marriage scammer. She's threatening to jump off the roof if you don't come face her. I took a deep, centering breath. I'm on my way. I hailed a cab and sped toward the corporate park. When I pulled up, it was an absolute circus. Nancy stood in the center of the plaza with a blaring megaphone, fake tears streaming down her face, surrounded by hired camera crews. There she is! Nancy shrieked into the megaphone, pointing at me as I confidently approached. This predator ruined my son's life. She stole our money. She deserves to be punished. The cameras immediately swiveled toward me, flashing brightly. Pedestrians stopped to watch the drama unfold. I didn't flinch. I walked right up to the center of the mob, pulled my phone out of my purse, and connected it via Bluetooth to a portable speaker I had grabbed from my apartment. Nancy, I said, my voice echoing over the plaza with lethal, booming authority. You say I ruined your son's life? Why don't we let the audience hear the truth? I pressed play. Nancy's shrill, wicked voice instantly blared out of the speaker for the entire corporate plaza to hear. Dave is going to announce, right at the reception, that he's transferring all his assets to me. Katie won't stand for it and will cause a huge scene. The wedding will fall apart. And then you'll take the initiative, pretend to get pregnant, and where will he go? He'll have to marry you. The entire crowd audibly gasped in horror. The hired camera crews lowered their lenses, staring at Nancy in absolute disgust. Nancy went white as a sheet. Her megaphone dropped from her trembling hands and clattered loudly onto the concrete. You faked that recording, she stammered wildly. A forensic police expert will determine that, I answered coldly. And by the way, Nancy, Sarah Mitchell just boarded a flight to Florida. She left you. She is not pregnant. She took your bribe money and ran. You have absolutely nothing left. At that exact moment, the piercing wail of sirens filled the air. 2 NYPD cruisers jumped the curb and pulled into the plaza. I had called them from the cab. Nancy's legs finally gave out. She collapsed onto the pavement in a pathetic, weeping heap as the police officers moved in to place her in handcuffs for criminal harassment, disorderly conduct, and organizing an unpermitted mob. The spectacle was finally, permanently over. Epilogue: Nancy Sterling was heavily fined, publicly disgraced, and hit with a severe restraining order. David, completely broke, and entirely dependent on a mother he now actively despised, vanished into obscurity. I moved to a beautiful new apartment in a different borough, changed my phone number, and completely disappeared from their radar. Within a month, I landed an incredible new job as the vice president of marketing at a massive, multinational corporation, making 30% more than I ever had before. 6 months later, while attending a corporate gala, I ran into a handsome, successful man in a tailored suit. It was Alex Smith, my college senior and my very first love. He had recently moved back to New York after his own divorce. We reconnected instantly. Alex was entirely different from David. He was fiercely protective, deeply respectful, and treated me like an absolute equal in every sense of the word. A year later, I walked down the aisle of a beautiful, sunlit botanical garden toward Alex. There was no theatrical showboating, no psychotic mothers-in-law, just sincere, quiet vows between two partners. That evening, as we were leaving the reception, I noticed a solitary figure standing in the shadows near the valet curb. It was David. He looked aged, worn down, and utterly defeated. He held a small, velvet jewelry box in his hands. "Katie, congratulations," he whispered, holding out the box. I didn't take it. Alex stepped smoothly between us, wrapping a protective arm around my waist. We don't need your gifts, Alex said firmly. I just wanted to wish you happiness, David muttered, pulling his hand back. I am doing wonderfully, I replied, my voice completely free of anger. Goodbye, David. We turned and walked to our waiting car. Alex tossed the velvet box into a nearby trash can without even opening it. A month later, Alex's firm offered him a massive 3-year contract in Paris. He asked me if I wanted to go with him. I smiled, packed my bags, and we flew across the ocean together. Today, I am sitting in our beautiful Parisian apartment, looking out at the Eiffel Tower, sipping coffee with a man who truly loves me. I left the madness far behind, and I built my very own empire. And I will never, ever let anyone take the microphone from my hands again.